This is my son, Mark Mesa. He was 19 years old when he was killed by a drunk driver. First of all, January 23rd, 1993 is the date that my son was killed. But January 22nd, 1993 is the last day I saw my son. He was laying on the couch. I asked my son if he wanted to join us to go bear hunting. He told me, "Dad, no." He says, "I'm going to stay home and earn some extra money for my insurance." I told him, "Okay, son, whichever way you want it, that's fine with me." As I was proceeded walking out the door, Mark hollered out, "Dad." I said, "Yes, Mark." He says, "I love you." I turned back at him and I said, "I love you too, Mark." This is the way we always ended up our sentences, is "I love you." It's always the last thing our family always said to each other. I went ahead and went up north to Mayo, Michigan with my friends. That night, my son went to work at the pizzeria. Just as he was leaving the pizzeria, there were 15 students waiting for him outside the door. They all wanted to go out with Mark that night. Mark turned around to the kids and he told them, he says, "I've got obligations to meet and I already promised Mike to go out with him." As he turned around and started walking away, Mark turned around, looked at his friends, and he says, "I love you till next time." That was a little unusual for him to say until next time, because usually he'll just say, "Love you, see you later." Him and Mike, they proceeded to go to the ski lodge at Alpines. Well, they found out it was a little too expensive to go to the ski lodge. So they turned around, they called my wife up on the cell phone and told her, "Mom, we're not going skiing because we can't afford it, so we're just going to go ahead and go to Mike's house and play arcades." As they were proceeding on Bogey Lake Road, apparently this young lady that has been drinking got intoxicated, didn't realize how bad she was. She headed toward my son's vehicle front end. They hit head on. It was quite an accident from what I've seen in the pictures. My wife received a telephone call. We were only a few miles from the hospital. The doctor or whoever called my wife up told her to come down to the Huron Valley Hospital, that my son has been involved in an accident. Well, according to the doctor, there was really nothing that major wrong with my son, so she was thinking that she's going to bring him back home. As they entered the hospital, they went to the emergency room. The doctor came out and told him that you can come in and see Mark in a little while. He's doing fine. 10 minutes later, the doctor came back out and pronounced Mark dead. You could imagine how my wife and my daughter felt. They were heart-stricken. My daughter started screaming and crying. My wife, same way. My wife looked at the doctor and says, "How can this possibly be? 15 minutes ago, you told me that I'll be coming in to see Mark, and now you're telling me that he's dead." What the problem was, he had a ruptured aorta. I don't know if you kids know how thick an aorta is, but it's about the thickness of one of those long balloons that you can tie up and make little dogs and stuff out of. That's how thick it is. So that's why when people tell you to wear a safety belt, it's not because they don't want you to fly through the windshield. That's one of them. But if you do hit the steering wheel at a heavy impact, your body goes one way and your heart goes the other. And naturally, it's going to rupture. We had to pick out a casket for my son. That's not the kind of shopping parents would like to do for their kids. But this is the type of shopping my wife and I had to do. We had to make a decision which one we're going to pick for him. This is not what parents want to do, is shop for their kids as a coffin. We like buying sweaters, hats, other materials. The following day, we had to go ahead and visit Mark at the funeral home at Lynch's. As we walked into the funeral home, it's what they call a walk-in. That means the funeral director will walk you into the chapel or a visitation room, whichever you want to call it. As we walk in, it's only had to be the brother, sister, the father, and the mother, etc. We walked in, my two daughters and my wife. Michelle, she walked in so far, she says, "Dad, I can't go up there." I says, "Michelle," I says, "you can come up when you're ready." Now my little one, Andrea, she had a walker. I wish you would have seen her as she was walking toward that casket. It felt like her legs were glued to the ground. She got up to that casket and she was looking at Mark. She was stunned. She didn't know how to handle this. When you have a child that has spinal bifida or any kind of defect, it's tough for a child to accept anything like this. My wife and I walked up there after. We had to pretend that we were the macho parents, that we're not going to break down. We got to keep strength for our children. That's the toughest thing in the world for any parent to do. His girlfriend, Alicia, she came up in front of the church and wanted to do a eulogy. She talked to Mark directly. No one was in church but her. Finally, we're ready to leave the church. As we were approaching the back door, the bagpiper started playing, and I asked my wife, who asked the bagpiper to come? She said, the police department did. He was playing Amazing Grace as we were walking out. I was walking behind the casket, my wife and I and my children. All I can remember is just crying and saying some words that I don't remember what I said. I dropped on my knees. My friends helped me up. We continued. We proceeded to the hearse. As they loaded Mark up into the hearse, I looked at Ed. I said, Ed, I can't leave my son's side. Can I ride with him? Ed said, this is not normally done, but yes, please go in. I sat next to my son, not thinking that my wife and my daughters are in a limo together, alone with our dad, but they understood. We entered the cemetery. The policemen were lined up, waiting for us to come to his final resting place. I wish you would have seen this football team. They all had white gloves on with a little red rose. As Mark was being lowered down into his final resting place, these big macho guys, they laid their gloves on his casket, and they put that red rose on his casket. After the families had left and the friends have all left the cemetery, I stayed. Again, it was tough for me to leave my son behind. Ed looked at me, he says, Tony, he says, you're going to have to let go. It wasn't easy to let go.
You talked about your feelings and your emotions throughout the situation with the loss of your son. Could you talk more specifically just about the story itself of exactly how the accident happened, what type of car your son was driving, what type of car the other lady was driving, what happened to her on impact, and what happened to your son and his friend on impact and thereafter with the accident?
Yes, I can, Brent. Like I said, now this happened January 23rd, 1993. Mark, they were on their way to go to the ski lodge at Alpines. What had happened is they found out they were short of money. And they decided, well, we're going to go to Mike's house and just play arcades. On the way back from to Mike's house, apparently this young lady had gone drinking at one of the pubs on M59. She ended up driving, I would say approximately 10, 14 miles. And she went around curves down Bogey Lake Road. Never missed a curve, but on a straightaway. Mark was heading northbound. She was heading southbound, heading back for home to her children. She accidentally went into my son's path and hit him head on. During the accident, a God sent Lieutenant Carl Fuse of the Bloomfield Police Department had just left dinner with his wife. They went out to dinner and they were going south on Bogey Lake Road. And they saw the accident happen. Lieutenant Fuse approached the cars. First he saw that the girl was dead. He checked her pulse. She died instantly. He went up to Mark's vehicle. Mike was walking around dazed in the street by himself. He had hit the windshield, done considerable amount of damage to his face. But he's okay now. Lieutenant Carl Fuse approached my son and asked him, are you okay? He says, yes. He says, my shoulder hurts. Not knowing that he was bleeding internally. Carl stayed with him for a long period of time till the ambulance came. The hospital was only about 4 minutes away. It was just around the corner from Bogey Lake and Commerce Road at Huron Valleys. As they were cutting Mark out of the car, Mark kept saying the words, my God, would tell my dad sees this truck. Kept asking Carl, how's the lady, or who's the other person in the car, and how are they? Well, little did he know that she had died. As the paramedics were removing him from the vehicle that he had a brand new pickup truck he just purchased. about 6 months before that. He was always polishing it, always cleaning it. If I washed my vehicle, he'd wash his, so his would look better than mine. But as they were taking Mark out of the car and they were putting him on a gurney to put him in the ambulance, he kept asking God that he doesn't want to die. And how he ever come up with that? And he started praying. And Mark was not the kind of guy that does a lot of praying, believe me. But he done some praying. They took him back to the Huron Valley Hospital, and like I said, they worked on him for quite a while. They also thought that he had a bad broken arm or something, but it wasn't that case. I know what had happened, because here's the report, the medical report that we received, again, and it shows the damages that he had, everything that was wrong with him at the time. But then what hurt us the most is that we had the EKG, and as you can see, the heartbeats were normal as they put him into the ambulance. But as he went along with the ambulance, the heartbeat started slowing down. As he got into the hospital, still slowing down, until finally he ended up with a flat line. And this is where he died at the emergency room. And these things tell you exactly how many minutes elapsed, this 12 minutes during that period of time. They call it cardiac arrest. I don't hold any animosity toward the young lady that killed my son, because I know there's a lot of people out there that do drink and drive. Apparently they think that's not going to happen to them. But I can guarantee you, kids, it'll happen to you. I've known too many students that have been drinking and driving and got into accidents and died. I know these students. And it hurts every time I get a report that somebody had just died because of drunk driving. So I ask you, don't put yourself in the position that this young lady was in with my son.
Tony, I appreciate everything that you've told us today, sharing this story with us. I hope that this helps all the other students out there really understand how important it is not to drink and drive.